You got the raise. You finally hit that number, the one you told yourself would change everything. And for about 3 days, it did feel different. You felt lighter. You felt like you'd crossed some invisible line into a version of your life where money wasn't always quietly strangling you in the background. And then something happened that nobody warned you about. The money disappeared anyway. Not because you blew it, not because you're irresponsible, not because you went on some wild shopping spree. It just dissolved into life, into the invisible current of expenses that somehow always expands to meet whatever you earn. And the worst part? You can't even explain where it went. This isn't a story about people who make bad choices. This is a story about a trap so perfectly designed, so psychologically airtight, that even smart, hardworking, financially aware people walk straight into it, over and over again, without ever seeing the walls closing in around them. By the end of this, you won't just understand why it happens, you'll understand why it was almost guaranteed to happen to you, and why the advice you've been given your entire life may have been making it worse. Let's start with a number that should feel impossible. Studies consistently show that a shocking percentage of people earning 6 figures, people making more than most of the country, are living paycheck to paycheck, not surviving on minimum wage, not working 2 jobs, 6 figures, and still 1 bad month away from real financial panic. That number doesn't make sense until you understand that income was never really the problem. Because here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. The paycheck to paycheck cycle isn't a poverty trap. It's a psychological one, and it is completely indifferent to how much you earn. There are people making $40,000 a year who are building wealth slowly, quietly, steadily. And there are people making $200,000 a year who are financially hollowed out, dressed beautifully, drowning invisibly. The income is different. The trap is identical. So, what is the trap exactly? It has a name in behavioral economics. They call it lifestyle inflation. But that name makes it sound like a choice, like something you consciously decided. And that's the first lie you need to let go of, because lifestyle inflation isn't a decision. It's a gravitational pull. And it works on you whether you notice it or not. Here's how it actually works. You're 24, maybe 26. You're making decent money for the first time in your life. Not great money, but real money. Money that lands in your account and feels like actual proof that the grind is working. And you're careful. You're watching what you spend. You're living lean because you remember what it felt like to have nothing. Then something shifts. A friend gets a new apartment, a nicer one, not unreasonably nicer, just a little more space, a little better neighborhood, a little less chaos. And you think, that makes sense. I'm an adult. I should live somewhere that reflects that. So you upgrade. Then your phone contract ends, and the new model is honestly better. And you tell yourself it's a tool, an investment, a thing you use every single day. So it makes sense to have something that works properly. So you upgrade. Then you start the new job, and everyone around you dresses a certain way. Not expensively, but put together. And you think, I can't show up looking like I'm still in college. So you upgrade. None of these decisions feel like lifestyle inflation. Each one feels like maturity, like becoming the person you're supposed to become. Like the natural progression of a life that's moving forward. But here's what's actually happening underneath the surface. Every upgrade you make quietly recalibrates your baseline. And once your baseline shifts, you can never go back below it without it feeling like failure. That nice apartment isn't a luxury anymore. It's the floor. That phone isn't an indulgence. It's the minimum. That wardrobe isn't excess. It's the standard. And now your raise, the raise you worked for, the raise you earned, doesn't improve your financial situation at all. It just funds the new baseline you accidentally built for yourself. You're not spending more than you earn. You're spending exactly as much as you earn. Always, effortlessly, as if by design. Because it is by design. There's an entire industry worth trillions of dollars built around one singular goal, making sure your baseline never stays where it is. Think about the last time you saw an advertisement for something you already owned and were happy with. You don't. Advertising doesn't target your contentment. It targets the gap between where you are and where you think you should be. It manufactures that gap, widens it, and then sells you the thing that promises to close it. The car you drive is fine, but you see someone in the new model and something happens in your brain, a subtle, involuntary recalculation. Not jealousy exactly, something quieter, a soft awareness that your car is now one version behind, that the story your car tells about you is slightly different than it was last year. Nobody put that thought in your head with a crowbar. It arrived gently, dressed as aspiration. This is what modern consumer culture does with extraordinary precision. It doesn't make you feel poor. That would be too obvious, too easy to resist. Instead, it makes you feel almost there, like you're 90% of the way to the life you want. And that feeling of almost is far more expensive than poverty ever could be, because it has no ceiling. Poverty has an endpoint. Almost doesn't. But the real problem goes deeper, because lifestyle inflation alone doesn't fully explain it. There's a second force at work, one that operates in the shadows of your monthly budget and rarely shows up in any conversation about personal finance. It doesn't have a dramatic name. It barely has a name at all. Most people just call it my subscriptions. Think about your phone right now. Go through the banking app in your head. Not the big, obvious expenses. The small ones. The ones that come out automatically, quietly, without you ever making a decision on the day the money leaves. The streaming platform you haven't opened in 3 months. The cloud storage you upgraded 2 years ago and never thought about since. The gym membership you use occasionally. The premium tier of an app you only half use. The news subscription from a moment of civic enthusiasm. The service that came free and then quietly converted to paid after a year. None of these are big numbers. That's the entire strategy, because there's something specific that happens in your brain with small, recurring charges. They fall below your threshold of active thought. You mentally round them down, categorize them as essentially free, and stop counting them. But they don't stop counting. They just count themselves, automatically, monthly, invisibly, while your attention is elsewhere. A financial planner once described this as financial wallpaper. You stop seeing it because it's always been there. But take it all down, and suddenly your walls look completely different. Add up every subscription, recurring charge, automatic renewal, and auto-billed service in your life. Actually do it sometime. The number will be wrong in your head. Almost everyone's is. Not because they're careless, because these charges are specifically engineered to be forgettable. And here's where things get psychologically dangerous. All of this, the lifestyle inflation, the subscription creep, the baseline shifting, it all happens in the context of a social environment that is actively, relentlessly, almost pathologically dishonest about money. Think about the last time someone was genuinely transparent with you about their financial reality. Not vague references to being stressed about money. Actual transparency. Here's what I earn. Here's what I owe. Here's what I actually have. Here's how close to the edge I actually am. You can't think of many times, can you? Maybe never. But think about how often you see the opposite. The Instagram story from someone at a restaurant you can't afford. The LinkedIn post about a promotion that comes with a photo of someone who looks like they've never worried about anything in their life. The casual mention of a vacation, said the way you'd mention going to the grocery store, that costs more than your monthly rent. Social media didn't create financial dishonesty, but it industrialized it. It gave everyone a platform, a filter, and a burning incentive to perform a version of their finances that has almost no relationship to the truth. And this creates a devastating psychological effect. It makes you believe that everyone else has figured something out that you haven't. That there's some secret your coworker knows, some system your friend is running, some effortless financial stability that everyone around you seems to have, and you seem to perpetually be chasing. You're not behind. You're just seeing their highlight reel while you're living in your own director's cut, complete with the deleted scenes, the blooper reel, and all the parts they'd never post. But knowing that doesn't make the feeling go away, because feelings aren't rational. And the quiet, ambient pressure of watching everyone around you apparently thriving is a form of financial stress that we have no good language for yet. It costs you money. Maybe not directly, but indirectly, it drives decisions. The dinner you go to because you don't want to be the one who can't make it. The gift you buy at a price point that doesn't reflect your budget, but does reflect your anxiety about being perceived as the friend who's struggling. The weekend trip you put on a card because everyone else is going, and the cost of not going feels somehow more expensive than the cost of going. Now, let's talk about the thing that nobody in finance talks about honestly: the actual emotional experience of financial stress. Because it's not just anxiety. It's cognitive load. There's substantial research showing that financial stress actively impairs decision-making. Not in some vague, metaphorical sense, in a measurable, neurological sense. When you're worried about money, a portion of your mental bandwidth is permanently occupied, not idle in the background, actively running, using processing power that could be used for creativity, for problem-solving, for strategic thinking about your career and your life. This means that the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle doesn't just affect your bank account. It affects your thinking. The very cognitive resources you'd need to break the cycle are being drained by the stress of being in it. It's one of the cruelest aspects of financial struggle. The harder it gets, the harder it becomes to see the way out. Not because people are weak or unintelligent, because their minds are genuinely more occupied, genuinely more taxed, genuinely less available for the kind of clear, deliberate, future-oriented thinking that financial change requires. And the advice that gets handed down, just budget better, track your spending, invest consistently, requires a kind of calm, methodical mental presence that financial stress actively destroys. This is not an excuse, it's a reality, and understanding it is the first step toward doing something different. Here's the part that might sting a little. A lot of the standard financial advice, the stuff you've heard since you were old enough to earn money, was built for an economic reality that doesn't really exist anymore. Live below your means. Okay, but housing costs in most major cities have risen at a rate that outpaces median wage growth by a staggering amount. The math of live below your means looks completely different when the baseline cost of living is structurally disconnected from what the economy is actually paying most people. Invest early and often. Great advice, but it assumes there's a margin to invest from, and that margin has been getting structurally thinner for decades. Not because people are spending more on luxuries, but because the non-negotiables have gotten more expensive. Healthcare, rent, education, childcare, the things you can't lifestyle inflate your way out of. This isn't a political statement. It's arithmetic. And the arithmetic has genuinely changed. The generation that invented spend less than you earn was doing so in an economy where a single income could support a household, where a pension was a reasonable expectation, where the gap between what things cost and what work paid was navigable without extraordinary discipline. That gap has widened, and we're still handing people advice built for a different gap. None of this means you're powerless. It means you need to be honest with yourself about which part of your situation is psychological and which part is structural, because the solutions are different. And confusing them, blaming yourself for a structural problem, or blaming the system for a psychological one, keeps you exactly where you are. So what does any of this actually change? Here's what I've come to believe, and it's not the answer most finance content will give you. The exit from the paycheck to paycheck cycle is not primarily a mathematical event. It is primarily a perceptual one. It begins when you stop measuring your financial progress against what other people appear to have. Because that race has no finish line. You will never win it. Not because you're not good enough, but because it was never a real race. It was a performance, and you were auditioning for an audience that was also auditioning, and nobody in the theater was actually watching the show. It begins when you stop treating your lifestyle as a signal of your worth. When you understand, at a cellular level, that the apartment you live in is not a reflection of your value as a person, it is a place where you sleep. The car you drive is not a statement about your trajectory. It is a machine that moves you from one place to another. These things matter in your life. They do not define it. It begins when you decide, really decide, not just as a thought experiment, that there is a version of your life that is genuinely full, genuinely good, and genuinely satisfying at a significantly lower cost than the one you've been led to believe you need. Not a deprived life, not a life of sacrifice and scarcity and watching other people enjoy things while you count cents. A life with actual margin, financial space that isn't immediately filled by the gravitational pull of consumption, where that margin becomes the most important thing in your financial picture. Not what you spend, what you keep. There's a moment, and I think most people have had some version of it, where you look at your bank account on a random Tuesday and feel a kind of exhausted recognition. You're not in crisis. Nobody's calling you. The lights are on, the rent is paid, but there's nothing there. And next month will look the same, and the month after. And in that moment, there's a choice. You can decide that this is just how it is, that this is adulthood, that everyone is quietly running on the same empty tank, and it's simply the cost of living a modern life. Or you can decide that the exhaustion you feel is information. Not just stress, information. A signal from somewhere honest in you that the current arrangement is not working, and not working by design, and that the design can be questioned and changed and rebuilt around something closer to what you actually want your life to look like. Most people choose the first option, not because they're weak, because choosing the second one is genuinely hard and genuinely uncomfortable and requires a willingness to look strange to people around you who are still running the same race. But here's what I know. The people who actually break the cycle, the ones who genuinely escape it, not through windfall or inheritance or extraordinary income, but through something quieter and harder. They all share one thing. They stopped caring what their financial life looked like to other people, and they started caring what it felt like to them. That's not financial advice. That's something older and simpler and much harder to sell, but it might be the only thing that actually works.